This episode begins at 1 o'clock in the morning. So, four college students are still alive. Two of them are just arriving home in exactly 3 hours and 4 minutes. So, a white car will pull up onto King Road for the fourth time. And what happens in between is what this series is about. So, before we go into the evidence, I want to be clear about what this series is and what it isn't. So, this is not speculation. This is not a theory. It's every detail I present in the series is going to be sourced from the probable cause affidavit, which is court records, prosecutor statements, forensic reports, and verified media documentation. So, where the evidence is incomplete, I will tell you that directly. So, my background, as most of you know, is in criminal law and forensic analysis. So, the lens through which we'll examine this case, not sensationalize. This series will cover the full arch of the Idaho 4 case in 7 episodes. And tonight will be episode 1, and we focus on a single window of time, which is going to be 1 to approximately 2 in the morning on November 13th. So, this is the last documented normal hour of these four students' lives. So here is what we know happened and what the evidence tells us about it. To understand what happened at 1122 King Road, you have to understand who lived there. So Madison Mogan, which is 21, a senior majoring in marketing from Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. By every account of the people closest to her, Madison was the person who made every room quiet. Kaylee and her had been inseparable since the sixth grade. So Kaylee, who was a 21-year-old senior, also from Coeur d'Alene, Madison's best friend since they were 12. On the night of November 12th, the last night that she was alive, Kaylee posted a photo to Instagram with the caption, "One lucky girl to be surrounded by these people every day." And that's the photo that is among the final documented records that we see so often of her life. Now, Xana Kernodle, who was 20, she was a junior studying marketing, and she lived on the second floor of 1122 King Road. She was awake at 4:12 on November 13th, and we know this because forensic analysis of her phone shows her using TikTok at that time. That detail becomes critical in episode 3. So, Ethan Chapin, who's 20, Xana's boyfriend, he was not a permanent resident of the house, but he was visiting Xana that weekend. So, these are not case files, they were students, children, and friends. So I'm going to present them with that in mind, and I want that framing to remain constant throughout this series. So there were two additional roommates in the house that night, and they initially survived. So the affidavit identifies them only as DM and BF. Their accounts are central to this case, and we'll examine their statements in detail in episode 4. Let's go back to November 12th. So Saturday night, November 12th, the last night out. The evening of November 12th, all evidence an ordinary Saturday for college students. Approximately 9 p.m., Xana Bernodal and Ethan Chapin were attending a formal event at Ethan's fraternity, Sigma Chi. The fraternity house was a short walk from 1122 King Road. Records confirm their presence there um, at approximately 10 p.m., records confirmed their presence there that evening. Now, at approximately 10 p.m., Kaylee Gonzalez and Madison Mogan went to the Corner Club, which is a sports bar in downtown Moscow. They were seen by multiple witnesses, and this was a normal Saturday night routine. So they're winding down, normal Saturday night. Lakeland leaves at around 1:45, who's actually Dylan's friend. And the forensic and behavioral question that this series is building toward is at that exact moment, what was Brian Kohlberger doing? So, where was he? And we know the answer, and it is documented in the affidavit. We'll examine it in full in episode 2, but here's what I'll tell you now. At By approximately 2 a.m., by all behavioral and forensic indicators, the residents of 1122 King Road were settling in, and the preliminary autopsy report released by Latah County Coroner Kathy Mabbitt stated that the four victims uh, were unalive sometime after 2 a.m. The actual time of death established by the affidavit is between 4:04 and 4:20. But the preliminary report tells us they were alive past 2 a.m., alive and home. So, what does a college house look like at 2 a.m. on a Saturday? That question matters, not for sensationalism, but because of behavioral reconstruction. basically, and it relies on understanding the state of the environment. So, forensic analysis of the crime scene, which we'll cover in detail in episode 3, suggested that some victims were asleep when they were attacked. And Madison Mogan and Kaylee were found on the third floor. Xana was on the second floor in her room. Ethan Chapin was with her. And DM, one of the surviving roommates, was in her room on the second floor as well. So the affidavit states that she woke up at approximately 4 a.m. And we'll reconstruct that moment in episode 3. But for now, the house was quiet. Everyone was home. Everyone was safe. So by 2 a.m. on November 13th, nothing had happened yet. Affidavit reveals, and what almost no documentary coverage has examined in detail, is that this was not a random location for Brian Kohlberger. He had been to this street before multiple times. So his cell phone data places him in the vicinity of 1122 King Road at least 12 times prior to November 13th. The earliest documented visit goes back to August 2022. So they're 3 months earlier. So that behavioral pattern is subject of our next episode, and it reframes everything about the case. So here's what the affidavit tells us was happening while the house was quiet. At some point between 2 a.m. and 3:29, Brian Kohlberger's phone was turned off. The affidavit states that his device went dark at 2:47 a.m. and it remained off until 4:48. The FBI's digital forensic analysis of his phone identified that this pattern, phone off during the period of correspondence to the homicides, is consistent with Kohlberger attempting to conceal his location during the quadruple homicide. And everybody has different feelings, and that's fine. But I'm just stating from the affidavit. So at 3:29, surveillance cameras in the King Road area captured the first of 4 passes by a white Honda 2015 Honda Elantra, later traced to Brian Kohlberger. And this means that while the house settled into the quiet of a Sunday afternoon or morning, DM and BF and Kaylee and Xana and Ethan were asleep. The vehicle was already circling. Well, most of them were asleep. But 3:29, first pass. The house doesn't know that this individual is literally circling. This is where episode 1 ends, not with violence, but with the weight of what is about to happen. So, 4 young people are asleep inside that house, and 4 minutes from now, in the forensic reconstruction, we will build in episode 3 that the car going to stop circling. But before we get to 4:04 a.m., we need to understand the months that led to that moment. Who was Brian Kohlberger? Why was he at the house 12? So, who was Brian Kohlberger? Why was he at the house 12 times before November 13th? And what does his behavioral profile tell us about the forensic evidence left behind? That is episode 2. If you're watching this series for the first time, thank you. I built this series because I believe that this case deserves more than headlines, and it deserves a methodological evidence based reconstruction that honors what actually happened and what the forensic record tells us. So, if you want to follow the series episode by episode, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell and hit all. Each episode drops in order and they build on each other, so the forensic depth increases with every installment. The victim in this case were real people, so they deserve precision, and that's what this series is built on. Episode 2 will drop again next week, and I will see you there.